I give the floor to Ms. Mata Ama Akia Pobee.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, I would like to express my gratitude for the opportunity to brief you on the situation concerning UNISFA and Abyei, alongside the Special Envoy of the Secretary General for the Horn of Africa. Mr. President, the political process between the Sudan and South Sudan on Abyei and border issues remains stalled, as it has been since the outbreak of the Sudan conflict in April 2023. Nonetheless, in May, both parties indicated to the UNISFA Strategic Review Team their openness to resuming contact on Abyei with the United Nations and African Union support. Last month, following a visit of the South Sudanese Foreign Minister to Port Sudan, the two countries announced their intention to reactivate cooperation agreements focusing on security and the economy. Since then, South Sudan has reconstituted a committee to pursue dialogue on Abyei. Special Envoy Song will provide you with an additional update on matters related to the political process and other regional issues. These movements towards dialogue are welcome developments. However, considerable challenges remain in achieving progress on the final status of Abyei. These include the dynamics related to the ongoing war in the Sudan and the political uncertainty in South Sudan. I also urge both South Sudan and Sudan to go beyond statements of intentions and to accelerate the implementation of existing agreements, as well as use the coordination mechanisms established to address outstanding challenges. UNISFA and the Secretariat are ready to support. In the recent strategic review of UNISFA, the Secretary General outlined a reinvigorated political role for the mission, which stands ready to provide support to the parties as they plan a resumption of talks. As per its mandate, the African Union continues to have a critical role in facilitating engagement, and the mission will continue its close coordination with the African Union in this regard. Mr. President, in Abyei, UNISFA has continued to report an increased presence of Rapid Support Forces elements and associated individuals in northern Abyei. This presence has contributed to elevated levels of crime, particularly in Amiet Market. The market's rapid growth in recent years has made it a potential flashpoint for intercommunal tensions, adding a new challenge for UNISFA. The presence of armed actors, including the Rapid Support Forces, have also resulted in the establishment of illegal checkpoints in northern Abyei. UNISFA has had no choice but to engage regularly with armed actors present in the area to facilitate their removal, remind them that their presence in the Abyei administrative area is contrary to the demilitarized and weapon-free status of Abyei, and prevent their return. In addition, armed actors have arbitrarily arrested local residents, including Community Protection Committee members and some officials appointed by Khartoum. This is deeply concerning. I reiterate the Secretary General's call for the immediate release of those illegally detained. South Sudanese security forces also continue to be present in southern Abyei in violation of the demilitarized and weapons-free status of Abyei. In early October, fighting broke out among South Sudan People's Defense Forces, elements at Athoni Junction. Several soldiers were killed and more than 100 civilians sought refuge at UNISFA bases. I reiterate the call for the immediate withdrawal of all armed forces and other armed actors from Abyei in conformity with the weapon-free status of Abyei. While regional dynamics and the presence of the rapid support forces have added complexity to relations between the communities in Abyei, the reduction in intercommunal violence seen in previous reporting periods has largely been maintained. UNISFA worked closely with the communities in this regard, including through the convening of a successful post-migration conference in Todach in May and June. The conference led to an agreement between Ngok Denka and Meseria representatives on the reverse migration. Nonetheless, tensions between the two communities and underlying grievances persist, notably in Amiet Market. Tensions also continue to exist between the Ngok Denka and Nuer community. Last month, clashes between the two communities in southern Abyei led to more than 150 displaced people temporarily seeking refuge at 2 UNISFA bases. Mr. President, as outlined in the recent strategic review of UNISFA, the operational environment for the former Logistics Center and Joint Border Verification and Monitoring Mechanism headquarters in Kadugli, Sudan, has become simply untenable. The presence of armed groups along the route has prevented resupply by road. Fighting in the area creates risks for the safety of peacekeepers at the base. The situation has become more dire with a surge in targeted drone strikes conducted by the Rapid Support Forces against the Sudanese armed forces, which has affected the air operations of the mission adversely. With headquarters functions for the JBVMM already relocated to Abyei, UNISFA is undergoing a reduction of their presence in Kadugli. As JBVMM operations continue from its 2 team sites in the safe demilitarized border zone, I urge the government of the Sudan to provide support without delay towards the mission's temporary withdrawal from Kadugli until the situation improves, including all the necessary clearances. Mr. President, the war in the Sudan and the continued influx of people displaced by the conflict continues to create economic hardship for the population of Abyei. UNISFA has worked to facilitate the activities of humanitarian partners who continue to deliver support to those in need, including interventions targeting high levels of acute malnutrition among children. Funding challenges have had an impact on partners' capacity for humanitarian support. Indeed, the Food and Agriculture Organization was forced to cease its operations in Abyei at the end of July, and the World Food Programme has reduced its footprint. The heightened humanitarian needs in Abyei, combined with the perennial lack of basic services, underscores the continued importance of the Abyei Joint Program of the United Nations country teams in the Sudan and South Sudan, implemented with programmatic funding from UNISFA. The joint programs work towards an environment conducive to peaceful existence in Abyei and to encouraging and leveraging the presence of UN agencies, funds, and programs remains important. We must, at the same time, be clear-eyed that with much less funding available and a minimized presence, there are difficult days ahead for peace building in Abyei. The mission's work to promote the rule of law in Abyei is more critical than ever, as rising crime rates represent an aggravating factor for intercommunal tensions. This is particularly true in the Amiet Market area. The recent strategic review outlined a plan to combine UNISFA's military, police, and civilian capacities to enhance its efforts in the Amiet Market. As the Secretary General pointed out, however, the best way to provide vital rule of law and stabilization support in Amiet Market is via the deployment of the formed police units authorized by the Security Council. I reiterate our urgent request to South Sudan and Sudan to provide full support for the immediate deployment of these important assets, along with the full contingent of authorized individual police officers. United Nations Police in UNISFA also continue to assist the Community Protection Committees and the Joint Protection Committee, which are community-based mechanisms that provide critical rule of law functions in the absence of the Abyei Police Service foreseen in the 2011 agreement. Women, peace, and security priorities remain a high priority in UNISFA's work, including increasing the numbers of female staff and promoting women's participation in local conflict management. A notable success during the reporting period was the post-migration conference in May and June, with women making up 41% of community representatives, up from 36% at the pre-migration conference in December 2024. A women's conference organized in June, bringing together 132 women from the Ngok Dinka and Miseria communities and leading to an agreement to establish a joint women's committee, was another step forward. Mr. President, the liquidity situation facing the organization, including peace operations, has forced UNISFA to implement contingency plans to reduce expenditures by 15% for the current budget period. We must be upfront in acknowledging that these measures will impact the mission's mandate implementation capacity by reducing the number of military and civilian personnel, shrinking funds available for programmatic activities, and straining mission support activities. They will also impact the mission's ability to implement the plans and recommendations outlined in the August 2025 strategic review. Nevertheless, the mission remains committed to implementing its mandate, including the protection of civilians in Abyei. UNISFA and the Department of Peace Operations will continue to engage closely with the host governments, the local communities, and the troop contributing countries to ensure full and open communication as these changes are put into effect, and we rely on their understanding and cooperation as we navigate this new reality. Mr. President, I want to thank the Acting Head of Mission and Force Commander, Major General Robert Yawa Fram, and all the uniformed and civilian personnel of UNISFA and the two country teams for their tireless efforts in support of peace and security in Abyei, particularly during these challenging times. I also want to thank the members of the Security Council for their consideration as we approach the possible mandate extension and for their continued support to UNISFA. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Ms. Pobee for